Good morning. I'm great. How are you? Good to see you. Good morning. It's good to see you all this morning. Yeah, you know, it is pretty awesome to be seen, right? Y'all ready to get started? Yes. Perfect. All right, so we're gonna start. With a little bit of risk management stuff, and before we get into that, I wanted to talk to you about what Texan offers look like over the last 3 days since we launched. In that 3-day time period, I've written 9 offers, and I did not do any advertising aside from just letting the agents who were in the class the other day kind of take the lead and generate their own opportunities out of it. And in that time, we've written 9 offers, 2 in Hutto, several here in Georgetown, several in Round Rock, and 1 in Manor and 1 in Jarrell so far. So I just wanted to give you a heads up and let you know that that's what's going on. Right now, we're not buying any of them. With the exception of 1, we are going to go under contract in a way that I told y'all you had the opportunity to do, which is to help people to no longer have a contingency when they're having to buy another home. So we've got 1 that we're going to go under contract on that is going to help an individual be able to purchase a home because she's going to be able to not have to have that contingency. And then in the contract, like I told you all about, we're going to put in special provisions, seller reserves the unrestricted right to terminate this contract at any point in time so that it allows you to have the ability to list it actively in the MLS. And when they get an offer that's better, they just terminate the offer that they had with Texan Offers and immediately are able to go under contract with that new offer. And it's something that doesn't need to be disclosed in the MLS that it's under contract because why? Because the seller reserves the right to terminate the contract at any point in time. That's what makes us so uniquely different from every other instant offer company out there is they reserve that right at any point in time, and we don't reserve that same right like all of the other instant offer companies out there. So that's what I wanted to share with you. Yeah?
How are you pricing them?
How are we pricing them?
How are you?
I'm doing market analysis on them. And
what its market price is, or 5% below?
A little bit below, depending on the neighborhood, a little bit below what the market value of the home is. And then there's, depending on the neighborhood as well, between an 8 and 10% fee on top of that for being able to utilize the instant offer. Now, keep in mind, it's all about getting the listing. It's not about us actually buying the home. We want to give you the opportunity to go and pick up listings with this. And so far, it looks like that's what the majority of the opportunities that are going to come up just from what you've generated are going to end up doing for you.
So for those of us who had an appointment and couldn't make that class, what are you doing it again?
I'm doing it again this Wednesday from 1 to 3, and then again next Wednesday from 1 to 3, and then again the following Wednesday from 1 to 3.
Thank you.
You got it.
Day or time?
Do Wednesdays from 1 to 3 not work for you, Lee?
Not really, no.
Okay. I will work on putting a morning one on the calendar.
Like an afternoon class Tuesday one.
We may be able to do that. It'll be a shorter version of the class. Yeah. We. I'll look at the calendar and see if we can do that sometime soon. What's that? Yeah, I did it all over the Williamson County area for the most part, and 1 in Travis County. Actually, yes, 1 in Sun City. Yeah. So, with that being said, what are y'all seeing out there? Is there anything that you've run across in the last week and a half, 2 weeks that you wanted to talk about? Yeah, Kristen.
Appraisals are coming in short.
In what? In where?
In Bell County.
In Bell County?
I've gotten a lot of calls this week from agents who are dealing with Tidewater
Okay.
or struggling with appraisals.
Well, we're not anywhere near the ocean, so why are they dealing with Tidewater?
Just saying. you
Just
tell
kidding.
us.
Okay. So, anyone else seeing that issue? All right. So, what do you do if you have an appraisal that comes in low? Cry? Did somebody say cry? Well, yeah, for a second. Okay. Yeah, I get that.
I gather my information together
Okay.
and fight it, and I've won too.
Mm-hmm.
2 out of
2 out of 2. So you've only had 2 come in low. Has that been recently?
No,
Or
in my 15 years.
in your 15 years? Well, congratulations. That's awesome.
Teaching the next CMA class.
Yeah, no kidding, right? Okay, good. I like that. So, yeah, gather your information and send it over to the appraiser to say, hey, here's the comps that I was able to find. I'm not sure if you took these into account. Now, here's the thing. It's getting more and more difficult in Bell County because not all of the data from previous MLS sales is in CTX MLS yet. Now, they've been on CTX almost exclusively for almost a year now. And before that, they were like Fort Hood was on Paragon, I believe. The Williamson County, Temple Belton was on a different one. So there's still a little bit of confusion on that. Now, with the CMAs, with the market analysis is that the appraisers do to come up with their value, that shouldn't affect it too much, yet there's a lot of people who also put them in the Austin MLS, and those things may not be taken into account. Some people put those listings in the Waco MLS. Those things may not be taken account for. So when you go through that, you've just got to come with your best possible comps that you have available to do that. Bill, have you seen anything like this up there recently?
Yes, and what I've offered, and it didn't come to be when you were in the old building, is that there is an absolute 100% perfect argument against the AMC designed appraisers. The appraisers now don't have the knowledge often of the market, and there's a lot of complaints with the Appraisal Institute over that, and with TALCV where Avis used to be and I was. The argument is, for lack of a better term, called a paired sale analysis. A paired sale analysis is a series of words that appraisers will often shy away from, will tell you they don't use that. That is the ultimate way to determine what contributory value is to certain properties. And so, to address one of the points that Scott made, yes, we have some problems. I live in Temple. I live in Belton, but my office is in Temple. We have some problems because some of the old data didn't migrate. But if you're using information more than 6 months old, you're going to have a really uphill battle trying to tell anybody, especially some underwriter, how that's applicable to what you're trying to accomplish. The market is very dynamic. We're not at your speed yet, but we are certainly faster than we've ever been. But going back to my point is a paired sale analysis takes a series of homes under the theory of substitution. In other words, if I can't have this home, does this meet the customer's needs? And you take all the elements of that are similar to your subject, and you simply remove them. You find out, you try to determine from the market what the contributory value is of a pool, or the contributory value of a 3-car garage, or the larger lots, or the wooded lots, or the list is endless. If you looked at an ARM, they're just, not ARM, what's a UAR, an appraisal report, there's 17 adjustments in there, and those categories are very broad. But if you take out the things that are similar, and what's left is what the difference is from your subject adjustment from your subject to your comparables. It's not complex at all. It sounds complex, but it's really not. When you talk about a lot that's got 18,000 feet with wooded cover compared to a bare lot that has 10,000 square feet, you have to, in your heart of hearts, say there's some kind of contributory value, some kind of attraction, that the difference in those two lots could be 6,000, 10,000, whatever. All that said, though, you have to remember that the Appraisal Institute limits you to 15% adjustment on any given item unless you can explain. Explain to me would be things like a lake or an ocean or a river or something that's significant. But if you only adjust 15%, those appraisers really, they're going to have a hard time discounting that from you. But if you need help with with how to do paired cell analysis, I'm more than happy to help you. Scott's got my phone number. We had a chance to do it at the old building, and I don't remember what happened. You know, life comes at us at 100 miles an hour.
Yeah.
Why don't we teach a class? Why don't we make that a class?
Yeah, we love that.
And I can bring one of my appraiser friends with you. They don't like to do this. There's a lot of work involved. You can't use 3 properties. You have to use it. I mean, 6 is kind of a bare minimum. When you get up to 10 and you start to pick them apart like this does, I mean, it jumps off the page.
Today at lunch, when Bill and I and Avis go to lunch, we'll talk about when we can bring that here. So we'll definitely get that. And Bill has helped several people in this office before with things like that. I know Sherry, you'd given him a call, or Sherry or Brian, you'd given him a call recently, and Trish. There you go. Trish has given him a call. So, yeah. Anyways, all right. So we'll bring that class and help you to do that. So yeah, Kristen's pretty happy about that. All right. So what else are you seeing? Anything else going on in the market that you're kind of worried about, or you got a knucklehead on the other side of the transaction, you're not sure how to handle the situation? Anything? Wow.
Just the market's
Perfect.
slowing.
Slowing a little. All right, so what are you seeing?
Well, this time, most every year, I have sold at least double.
Yeah, so if we actually go back and we look at it, prices this year are very similar to the prices that they were last year, right? Yet consumers, based upon the past 7 years of our market, have anticipated, crazy jumps in prices, and they're not seeing the exact same happening this year. So yeah, it has slowed the market down a little bit. I believe that that's actually an advantage to us, because if we were to continue to grow at the rate that we were growing year after year after year, we would end up in 2007 again. And we'd collapse the market with overinflation in the housing market. I don't believe that that's going to happen right now. I don't think that it's going to be a likely scenario anytime soon, because it is leveling off. There were 2 things that really kind of needed to happen. Prices needed to start leveling off, and interest rates needed to start going up. Interest rates have gone up a little bit, but we've kind of seen them stall out right around the 4 to 4.5% range right now. They actually went back a little bit right after I closed on my house. They dropped some, which is awesome for everyone else, not so much for me, but it is what it is. But I believe that when this gives us the opportunity to hone our skills. And what I mean by that is 4, 5 years in a row, I mean, it was stick a sign in the yard and it's going to sell, right? Now it's not so much that way. We're having to do real work, have the conversations that need to be had on the front end of things. And that's the biggest opportunity that I believe we have, is to make sure that when we're in those listing presentations, we're talking about what the market's really doing right now. We're not just blowing sunshine up their butt and saying, hey, we're just going to put a sign in the yard, it's going to sell in 20 minutes. That's not the reality of the situation, unless you, for some reason, have somebody who wants to sell a house in downtown Georgetown for under $200,000. In which case, yeah, you're probably going to get a lot of multiple offers in like 3 minutes of putting it on the market. Yet, we can have those conversations now about pricing it right, and about what the market's really doing, and setting them up for, here's what we're seeing with the numbers. Yes, I understand that you want to make more money. I'm willing to do that for you for a certain amount of days, and if it doesn't sell, if we don't have offers or we don't have a certain amount of showings within 10 days, then we're going to go ahead and sign this amendment to reduce the price to where it makes sense. I believe that that's why there's a big opportunity for us with the instant offer program, because it's going to help us get in the door of those people who want the instant experience. And at the cost of the instant experience, like I showed everyone in the class the other day, people will be willing to leave about $16,000 on the table on a $245,000 house. Is it really worth that convenience? Because the average salary in the United States of America, if we just averaged it out completely, is about $38,000. That's about half of an average salary for somebody in our country. So, I think we just get better at having conversations with people. Anything else? Nothing? Well, that was easy.
Okay, I have a gratitude.
Yeah, what's up?
Thank you for putting all the work into that program and giving us that opportunity.
Hey, it's my pleasure. I felt like it was something that needed to be done because our industry is changing, and if we weren't able to compete in that way, I'd be putting you at a disadvantage. So it's a risk, and I mean, that one that it was obvious to take the risk.
So can we get a billboard on 29 like GC has?
So you're telling me thank you, and you're not doing enough now. Like, whose billboard are you talking about?
You know, Diane's brother.
Diane's brother? Oh,
2T.
Christopher Waters. Yeah. It's actually her son. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah. Yeah. The biggest difference between what he does and what we're doing, I'm open to all kinds of advertising you want to pursue. The biggest difference between what he does and what we do, though, is his whole thing is, let me list your house, and if I don't sell it, I'm going to buy it.
Right.
For 75% of the value, but we don't need to talk about that. And that's why he's able to go on the radio and say, and guess what? Last year I didn't have to buy any houses at all. Well, of course you didn't, because nobody's dumb enough to sell their house for 25% of the market value, right? Our whole thing is, let's give them that option on the front end and get the ability to show them, here's what it's going to look like, and we can go ahead and price it aggressively for you to be able to accomplish what it is you need to accomplish. So our conversation's different than the conversation that him and his company are having, because his is less, well, look, if I don't sell it, I'll just buy it from you. And he's going to let them pretty much pick their price, because if you go and look at a lot of the listings that gentleman has in the MLS, there's a lot of them that sit for quite some time in some very desirable neighborhoods. I think there's several here in Georgetown. There's even one in the Old Town area that's way overpriced, yet he'd still be willing to buy it for 25% of the value. And our thing allows us to have that conversation. Let's find their motivation. Let's see what it is that they need to do. What is their time frame? And then we can price it according to what their motivation truly is, and do it in such a way that you get to help them control the transaction through knowing what their motivation is. So, any other, I mean, while we got some time, anything else on Texan offers that you want to know?
I was curious, there was a house in the Villages
Mm-hmm.
with Christopher Waters,
Mm-hmm.
and it was vacant, and this house was just deteriorating. The weeds, it was just... So is that another thing that they don't offer, is like, for example, to help look after that house?
Well, you got to keep in mind that if you take what she said was, there's a house in, is it Georgetown Village? Okay, there's a house in Georgetown Village that this gentleman has on the market, and she's, the weeds are growing up and things like that. Is that something that they don't offer to maintain the house? Well, you get into a really, really gray area there, because that could be considered property management if you were to take a listing and then do all of those things and then put in the expenses and pay for that stuff out of your own pocket. First of all, are you guaranteed that you're going to get your money back? Second of all, did they choose who was going to be doing the repairs? Did they, or doing the maintenance of the property? Did they choose that person? Are they paying them directly? Are you just facilitating somebody to come out there for them if they've approved it? I wouldn't encourage you to say, hey, we're going to take care of everything for you, without giving them the ability to choose the person who's going to be doing those things for them.
Right. I'm just curious if they actually have, when you're a realtor, you represent your client. And I don't mean you've actually got to do all that stuff for them, but you can at least, you're communicating to your client, look,
Your house looks terrible, you should get somebody over there?
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you'd have to drive by the house in order to know that.
Right. Right. That's it, all the
Yeah.
It's just,
Yeah.
But, if I'm representing someone who's not living here as, Mexico, but I pop by and just make sure everything's looking okay.
Mm-hmm.
I presume they probably don't even do that.
Well, that's one of the benefits that you would get for working with somebody that's local to
Right.
you, that lives in your neighborhood, or that knows the market well, that is going to take the time and to devote to your listing alone to let you know what it looks like, especially if they're out of town. Yeah, hey, it's time we get somebody to go over there and take care of this.
Mhm. I'm sure most of the companies we're talking about don't have that advantage.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, another thing that has happened over the last couple of days is when is an offer fully executed, and at what point in time, if you have another offer come through, can you let the other side know that you've got another offer that came through, even while you're waiting for paperwork to come back? So
Before you receive it back.
before you receive it back, exactly. So
And with an executed date.
exactly. So
Can you repeat
may I
that?
share? Okay, so Judy and I had a conversation yesterday. What ended up turning out?
Oh, it was great. I just noticed him that we were rescinding our counter offer
Mm-hmm.
via email and text. He confirmed via text last night, which I went to the email then and I sent him an acknowledgement of his acknowledgement of our rescission.
Yeah,
And it went under contract in about 20 minutes after that.
with the other person. Yeah, because you'd been negotiating that for about 2 weeks, right?
Yes, and it was
With another person, and then another offer ended up coming in while their counter was out, and they said, "Hey, forget the counter. We're withdrawing it."
So I'm assuming her seller had signed that counter.
Her seller had signed the counter. Yes. Yes.
So it was a little dicey for a little bit, but the interesting thing about it is, and I think it was a good example to me of how important it is how we start negotiations. Because agent number one was trying to, from the very beginning, prove why we, the seller, should receive or accept a lower price, saying this is wrong and that, very contentious. And then every time we would agree on the terms, then he would come back with some changes.
Mm-hmm.
And that happened numerous times when we thought everything was ironed out. And then I had an open house Sunday and these people walked in, they wanted it, got me an offer over. So that's when I called you to make sure I was doing everything correct.
Yeah, and after we talked, I ended up listening to your message. I love the way you started it. I'm so glad I have a team leader that I can call, and I don't have to be a team leader anymore.
That is amen, brother. And I'm glad you're the team leader. You always answer questions and are so willing to help. I appreciate that.
Yeah, my pleasure. All right, anything else? Yeah.
Okay, so I have some buyers and we put in an offer on some property almost 3 weeks ago.
Okay.
And the listing agent, she's related to the property owner but didn't disclose, but there's lots of things kind of like that. But she told me that there was a cash offer for less and we're above asking. But she won't accept our offer. So she's taken it temporarily off the market, but I think she's just collecting offers.
That's what it sounds like to me.
Temporarily off market.
Well, I mean, she's not actively marketing it like she was, but she won't respond to our offer. And we've offered more than asking price, and she's already told we were the second offer.
In cases like this, I've never been a fan of putting a timeline on an offer that you send. However, in this case, if you want movement, I would put a timeline on it and say, you have 48 hours to respond to this offer, or we're removing it.
Okay. I mean, when people really want it, of course, but
I mean, you're waiting 3 weeks.
yeah. And I'm trying to be patient and professional and emailing periodically. Hey, just checking status. you know, and she always has an explanation.
Is this
"Oh, I'm gonna-"
individual the broker or?
Yes.
Oh, well,
And she says, "Oh, well, I'm, you know, meeting with the sellers, her parents. I'm meeting with the sellers, you know, on Thursday, and we're gonna have a final interview." And then that never happens. So she keeps giving me these dates, and nothing's happening.
yeah, that is.
It's odd, but it's still the seller's choice.
It is. It is a seller's
So
choice.
there's
Yeah.
no- just- there's
Yeah,
no
can you
timeline.
can you prove that they're just, you know?
Well, I don't even know that she's presenting my offer. You know what I mean?
Maybe have the buyers put in writing that they request the sellers put in writing that they've seen their offer.
You can request that, but it's not.
I don't think any of
There's-
that's gonna work.
There's nothing that requires that them to answer that.
Or let her do it.
No.
Yeah.
Move on.
I just keep looking with them.
Yeah, it's kind of a unique property, so.
I know, but
Yeah.
they're not getting it.
Try the timeline thing first. Yeah, Tom.
I just want to share something. I had a meeting with a bunch of people today. I watched a video yesterday, and I just want to challenge anybody in here, anybody that's listening, that two different statistics. I got it here. 48% of salespeople never call people to contact them. 25% try 2 times. That means they contacted them once and they had 1 follow-up. 12% make 3 attempts. So that's 85% if you're doing the math. If you're not doing the math, that's 85%. 8 out of 10 sales, just in general, come between the 5th and the 12th contact. So if you subtract the 85 if you subtract 80 from the 85, that means 5% of business happens to come to you with luck in the first several contacts. If you're somebody that wants to grow your business and be successful at what you do, you need to make more than 3 attempts. You need to plan on making 12 attempts. And when you do that, you'll have more business than you're expecting now.
Yeah, and for those of you who came and took Business by the Book with us last, I think it was in September when Holly came and did it with us. The model that came out of the MREA, the most recent models that have come out of it, are 9 contacts, 9 follow-up attempts with every single person. And if you go and purchase leads from Realtor.com or Zillow or anything like that, on average, you're looking at a 19-month investment into that person before they're really willing to make something happen. That's what the average time from an internet lead like that really takes to close. So what I hear you saying, Tom, is the fortune is in the follow-up and it's in our database.
Right. Well, and I'm really speaking to me out loud. I mean,
Thank you.
Yeah. So I mean, I'm got plans in place for how I'm going to be more successful and have 8 to 10 closings in hopefully in July and 8 to 10 in August.
Good. All right, well, y'all ready to talk about HOAs?
Yes.
All right, let's give it up for the one, the only Mr. Bill Jones. Don't forget to turn your mic on.
Honor and a pleasure to class to determine how what we're going to get pretty organic. Some of this stuff is going to be a little bit boring to you, but there are some jewels hidden in the middle of this for you, things to help I will start where I stopped the last time I met with you folks.
His mic's not working on.
Oh, okay. No, I'm just gonna give him mine.
Says it is.
That one should be, it's on.
Okay, keep mine. So, the last time we met, Avis and I had a little confessional, if you will, about how we had gone through our careers and the challenges we had and the opportunities that were afforded us. And I ended by sharing with you on April the 22nd, 2013, I had a reality check. I was enjoying a group of great realtors in Amarillo on a Thursday afternoon. The 22nd, on the next Friday, I got up and had breakfast, was prepared to do something not unlike what we're going to do here. Made it all the way to the lobby of the Ambassador Hotel, put my things in a chair, and died. Literally laid down and died. So my point in that is, every day's a gift. I would like for you to wake up every morning and understand this is an opportunity for you to go out there and to help people determine and find in you what integrity, what honesty, what trustworthiness, all those things that the Real Estate Commission and certainly the realtors following that require you to do. I think that all of us, me particularly, take life for granted. I am extraordinarily proud to be here with you. I love this building. I'm very proud of this building. I have walked this when it was a gift shop, and I've walked the hole on the roof that caught me by surprise, and I'm pleased with the setting that you folks get to come to, and I wish I were closer. I'm way up in Temple. My little short history, my mom started my company in she started in real estate in '66. She started our company in '72. We're in the same location since '72. I'm the kid. I started in '78. Licensed in '77, began in '78. What I'm going to share with you today is meant to be very fundamental. Most of you, some of you know all these things. Some of these things you will not know. There are opportunities buried in here that I will share with you for you that just do residential sales, those of you that work for people that don't do owner-occupied properties. That's about 35% of my total business is property management. We got about 3,000 or so properties. We have 73 of these HOAs, and I keep flipping the switch and I don't mean to do it, but this is what most people think HOAs do. They think we're all just a bunch of bums. They think we're all out there to measure the grass and to tell them what they can't do and to interfere with their, now I'm going to take you back to your licensing, quiet enjoyment of the property. Kind of a funny term, but that's part of what real estate is, goes way back. Anybody ever heard of a guy named Aloysius Leopold? If you ever get a chance, Google him. He is probably still alive, the smartest man ever to darken the door, if you will, of anything to do with real estate. He's a professor of law down at St. Mary's University. I've listened to him. I bought his books. Fascinating, deep theories of why we do business like we do business. This is not what we do. Some more things like this is the first thing we hear from most people is, you can't tell me what to do. This is my house. You have no right to tell me I can't park on the grass, or I can't park on the street, or I can't, and the list just goes on and on and on. And then they say, well, they'll try to hold us hostage. They'll say, I'm not going to pay until you fix the pothole in the street in front of my house. Well, I got sad news for you. I don't own that street. I have no say over that street. Now, certainly we have agreements. I'm going to share with you what that means in depth in a few minutes. Or they'll say, you got to do something about my next door neighbor's cat walking on my car.
Constantly. I wash my car every day, and every day I find footprints of the next door neighbor's cat. I think I'll just shoot it. Or your dog's using my front yard as a toilet, and you need to pick it up. You need to do something with it, and you'd be surprised the phone calls my girls. I have 7 wonderful ladies that work for me, and they take this abuse constantly, over and over and over, about HOA members and how they complain endlessly about these kind of things. And the list just goes on and on and on and on. Let's take you back, as far as I know, to how HOAs, or how common interest developments, that's a better word, came to be. The first one was in Boston. It's still there today. It's at the Boston Commons. It's a fascinating program in what is commonly termed in Texas as undivided interest. In other words, you own your house, and you own your house, but all of us own a park, or all of us own some common areas. All of us have some liability. All of us have some duties and responsibilities to mow it, or to plant flowers, or to do whatever. There are responsibilities to everybody, and some folks just simply say, I don't want to pay. I can't put up with this kind of stuff. This is a contract. How it really came into definition. First, let me apologize. If Avis were here, she would go a big amen. I will tell you that I am guilty of not necessarily being politically correct. I say things sometimes that offend people. I don't mean to, but I'm just simply repeating what I have heard and read, and I have it up here if you want to read it as well. The Supreme Court of the United States weighed in on what is now called homeowners associations in 2 very famous cases in 1948 in Seattle. Both of them had to do with things that surfaced in Texas. I have neighborhoods like that where I live, where there was a prohibition against people owning real estate in these neighborhoods. One of them was against the Japanese culture. Remember, we had just finished a war with the Japanese, and the people in Seattle said, we don't want any of those people here. The second one was against the Jewish people. They don't want any Jewish people, whatever that was all about. One of my very closest friends is a Jewish fellow, and I don't understand what people have against them. They're very smart from a culture, very smart from their heritage, and they have this thing about God looking out for them. So I don't know where that all came from, but the Supreme Court finally weighed in and said that you can enter into a contract, called a covenant, in a neighborhood to say you will or will not do things. You can control it, and you give up your rights under some circumstances, all of them being arguable. We're going to talk a whole lot about that in a few minutes. So in Texas, we just didn't deal with these things. The very first HOA came to be in 1964 down in Houston. It was actually an apartment house that they converted into townhouses, and that was the first. It was called an SRA. That was the first time we saw this common-owned development properties where people bought in and owned things they couldn't use, the elevator, whatever it was in this particular building. They could certainly use it, but they didn't own it. They owned 1/64th of it, or 1/44th of it, or whatever the number is divided by the members. So the legislature in Texas, really looking at this as a strange animal, for years added to, in kind of a Band-Aid approach, different laws from Chapter 202 to 209 in the Property Code, trying to address issues as they came out of court decisions, or as they came out of issues that you're going to recognize in a few minutes when I talk about them. And it was just a mess, just honestly a mess. So 2 people, one of them has since retired, just went blank. Anyway, one's a senator and one's a state rep. Bert, dang it, I can't think of his last name. He retired, but what they tried to do was fix this in kind of a uniform way in these huge 100-page bills. The problem when you start writing these huge, big, comprehensive omnibus bills is there's always something in there. Somebody said, well, you're goring my ox and I'm against it and I'll kill it or I'll do whatever I have to do. And it never got anywhere. Finally, in 2011, let me get over to that. Oh, I meant to tell you about this. HOAs bring something fascinating to the table. HOAs bring a protection, if you will, recognized by the Appraisal Institute that an HOA, now there's an asterisk here, ran properly, will add as much as 3% or all the way up to 7%, 15% in some extreme cases, just to a location adjustment. One of the big things. I don't know what I don't know. What I've always been taught is the two things that are the most important things when you're trying to determine a price is the age and the location. Now, age is a wicked woman. Age comes in real and effective. Real could be and Scott's met my wife. I'm very proud that she's 66 years old, but she looks like she's 50 years old. That's kind of that effective and real age example I'd like to use. Location, though, is really a hard issue. Would you rather live here or would you rather live over there? So those location adjustments are important, and HOAs give you most cases, give you a significant location adjustment. Location adjustments, when they're in gated communities, just skyrocket. They just go nuts. Everybody wants to live in a gated community. The problem is the cities don't like them because they can't get their fire trucks and they can't get their ambulances in them. The newspaper boy can't get in. The trash trucks can't get in easily. It's kind of a hard challenge for a lot of folks to run them. We have 3 of them, and they pretty well drive us crazy for one single reason. The drunks like to get all liquored up on Friday night and run in my gate. But a gated community gives people a sense of security that is really, in my opinion, very fleeting. You can climb the gate. Almost any gate that I see, take me to any and I'll show you, if they're Chamberlain operators, I can open them with a screwdriver. But it's just a sense of false security. You're not welcome here, can't you see? Fences. Fences make good neighbors, bad neighbors, however it is you want to apply to it. So in 2011, we went through the Reform Act and we had 36 bills out of about 80, 36 bills that were actually signed by the governor. The governor at that time was Perry. Perry says, yes, I understand we need to do something about this. This is a problem. HOAs are ran by mom and pops. HOAs are ran by tyrants. HOAs are ran by people that are trying to collect money and offering nothing, and there's no transparency to it. There's this huge challenge of you seeing what's going on behind the closed doors. So the HOAs were thrown into a huge fix, if you will. Part of this, timeliness cranks in here, came under Obama. Obama had a lot of things I can criticize him for, but one of the things that came out of this, not Dodd-Frank, mind you, but was the Fair Debt Collection Act. Now when we collect money, and we do it almost every day, we have, I don't know, maybe 7,500 homes we collect from. We tell them, you owe money, and you have to pay it. And there's ways they have to describe what that money is for. We call it monies with an S on the end of it. People go, well, that can't be. It has to be IES. No, it's monies. We have to give them fair warning. And in the end, the ugliness that comes from this, I've only done it once, but down in Harris County, they will foreclose on about 1,200 homes a year for different reasons. Most of them, you don't pay your HOA whatever you owe, whether it's a fine for mowing the yard or your kid selling lemonade on the corner or whatever. There's all kinds of rules to live with. I have to turn my head to read this.
Harris County's #1 in the state for doing that.
#1, they are ruthless. Paint your door yellow, fix it, we're going to foreclose. Tell your kid to stay out of the park after 8 o'clock, we're going to fine you. Let me apologize. I just got out of the hospital with pneumonia. If I run out of air, it's because I'm healed. I'm over it. I just can't breathe. I just run out of air sometimes. The HOAs are part of a much more fundamental way for you to look at it is how a developer comes in, changes the use of the land, takes 100 acres, 5 acres, whatever it is, changes the use of the land under a declaration. In that declaration, they set forth the HOA structure, which are called the bylaws. The bylaws tell you how the organizational part, directors and elections and meetings and whatever. Heretofore, it was virtually impossible to change those covenants once the developer was out of the picture. Whether they sold 100% of the lots or whether it was after 10 years, they're gone. And so then it's left to the members to run this thing. It was very challenging to change those. The legislature recognized that. They went through it's very hard and very challenging to read it, but they changed that number from 75% of all the members to vote to a redefined 67% of the members saying that we can change the use of lot 4 and 5 and combine them and build a house across the property line or whatever. There are thousands of examples of how HOAs made it very difficult for people to change the use or to enforce mowing the side of a hill that you can't walk. I'm in a lawsuit over one of those right now, where the next door neighbor's upset because the guy next door won't mow the yard that you can't walk up. You can climb a rope up, but they want him to mow it for some reason. It's out at Lake Belton. I don't know if y'all been up to where I live or not. Everything, and when I say all means all, documents have to be available online if, here's the underlying thing to look for when you're selling a home, that if they have a presence on the internet. If they've got some kind of website that talks about Facebook babysitting, I don't know, there's all kinds of examples to choose from. They are required statutorily to have all of their documents available, so you can go on there and look and say, I don't want to live in this neighborhood. These people are nuts. Or this is really what I've been looking for, where you can't have can't have trailers, travel trailers, you can't have trucks over 3/4 of a ton, you can't park on the grass, you can't clean deer in the front yard, whatever. There's all those kind of restrictions, if you will, built into the covenants. So all those documents have to be out there so that you can read them before you go show somebody, if you're familiar with the neighborhoods. I have a home I close on Thursday out in Mission Oaks. Mission Oaks has got a very complex, different, I know the guy that wrote them, Bob Burton is a well-known attorney in Austin writing covenants. Bob wrote the covenants for Mission Oaks. They're just different, and it took me several times to grasp some of the underlying things that he put forward on this particular phase 4. That's where this house is. I've sold.
Charles, can I ask a question?
Sure.
On your slides, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but on one of those slides you said it's a contract. But how is it a contract if the buyer, what does the buyer sign to make it a contract?
Okay, great question. So what the Supreme Court said was that the developer has created these conditions that you are purchasing this property subject to when you buy a home in this development. What you see, to answer your question, what you see now at closing are planned unit development agreements. That's part of the, y'all ever share with you a term called GFEs? GSE, government sponsored enterprises. That's going to be the Fannies, Freddies, Ginnies, FHAs, VAs, all those people, is they'll have in their loan documents a planned unit development, or there's another term I can't pull off the top of my head. They have these agreements that say you are buying your property subject to and conditioned by you mowing the yard, or you not planting cactus, or you not having more than 2 children, or, I mean, the lists can be endless. It doesn't have to be reasonable, and I'll explain that in a few minutes. But it's part of your purchase, subject to, and if you read over in paragraph 6, if you remember those 8 conditions where it's the mortgage and marital rights and water riparian rights and all that stuff, well, that's where the covenants and conditions and restrictions kick in, and that's part of the agreement when you buy the property that's going to show up either in your agreement back to the lender or in your agreement back to the deed of trust. It's going to refer to that planned unit development agreement. HOAs were designed out of that Supreme Court decision in 48, and a subsequent agreement called Greater Twin Rivers versus Twin Rivers went back to the Supreme Court in 81, where it was clearly said by the Supreme Court of the United States, if you buy a property in a planned unit development or a common interest development, you have to abide by those rules. Now, reasonability is going to kick in, and I'm going to show you how that went out the window very recently in Texas in a couple of cases that present you, I believe, an opportunity, if you will. These are the things that kind of blew up in our face that we knew, but guess what? The lawyers will still, to this day, argue with you in this county. I know one right now that tells me I'm crazy. But if you, and you can have copies of all this, I'll give it to Scott and you can have my slides. If you look at 202-006, it says, to be effective, to be enforceable, it's got to be recorded in the county of venue. Most lawyers, until recently, never recorded the bylaws. Those are the organizational documents. They say, oh, that didn't matter. It didn't have any effect on anything. It just tells us how to do it. Well, it's important because that law clearly says to be enforced, in other words, how to do elections and how to determine terms and all that stuff, has to be recorded. Board elections, this is when we get away from the developer, when he's no longer or she's no longer choosing who serves on the board of directors. That's at 75% of the lots sold, by the way. Those are defined, and those elections have changed now. Every time the legislature meets, they change the rules. The one that's the most obvious one is we had secret ballots, and then we couldn't have secret ballots. And then we had secret ballots, and now we've got secret ballots that have to be kept for 5 years. So all of this stuff has changed, and it's all found over in that 593 part of the property code. If you've been convicted of a crime, you are not eligible, period, ever. Never. All means all. Can't come back and serve for any reason. They changed this to 75% of the lots or 10 years. That was always kind of a thing we saw show up in the covenant's conditions, but it never did have any real teeth in it until 209-00591. You must have annual meetings, period. That's a no ifs, ands, buts. No way you can get around it. If you don't have an annual meeting, you can't enforce anything. So if you're selling properties in HOAs and they don't have an annual meeting, you can call their hand. I would suggest not to pick a fight, not to be some kind of pious person sitting on the front row of the Baptist church going amen to everything, is for you to ask the seller or ask the HOA, when was your last annual meeting? Can I get minutes from it? Can we read how you folks conducted? Those are all legitimate questions and they can't turn you down. This one is kind of an interesting one. You must give notice. We fell under all HOAs, SRAs, CIDs, whatever you want to call them, POAs, fell under the guise of the Texas Open Meetings, Open Records Act. That's how schools, cities, everybody operates. You have to be transparent. You have to let people watch you conduct business of the HOA. You have to let people ask questions at some point during the meeting. Now you can limit them to 2 minutes. You can tell them you can't repeat. If he asks that question, you can't repeat the question because you didn't understand the answer. Ask him to explain it to you. He didn't seem to have any follow-up questions. But you have to have these annual meetings and you have to give notice no less than 10 days, no more than 60 days, and it has to be posted in a conspicuous place. We do it on the internet and we do it with little signs we've got at every entrance or every exit to our HOA areas. We got some that have as many as 9. There are some exceptions. If they're going to talk about fines, if they're going to talk about damages, if they're going to talk about foreclosing on somebody, if they're going to talk about enforcement, there's some limitations. They don't have to do it in front of everybody, except, here's where the open meetings kick in. They can go deliberate, but they have to come back in front of the body, whoever's there, and vote in front of them. Now, they don't have to explain their decision. They don't have to go to any detail. They just said after further consideration and after much discussion, we have found that Scott forgot to mow his yard for the second time. We're going to take his oldest child. And they can say those kind of things, and it's up to them to figure out how to enforce it, of course. This all comes under the government code. Recently, if you read this kind of garbage, I'm very guilty of reading it. After 12 years, the Open Meetings, Open Records Act lost its teeth. It's one thing to have a law, it's something else to have a way to enforce it. Under the Open Meetings, Open Records Act, out of a lawsuit coming out of Conroe, it used to be if board of directors had a private meeting, I call Scott, I discuss something. I call Diane, I discuss something. I call Tom, he just left, I discuss something. That's called a walking quorum. And up until January the 16th this year, that was a $500 fine and 30 days in jail. It was a criminal act. Well, a judge over in Conroe got all jammed up on this 12 years ago, and he further defined what the definition of a jury is. The jury being the Texas Criminal Court of Appeals. They determined that the judge had a much better lawyer than the state had, and they vacated the $500 fine in the criminal act because it was ambiguous. The governor says it's not ambiguous. He's ruled it twice now, but we don't have any more teeth, so you can't go to jail now for having these discussions out in a parking lot. Y'all know those kind of meetings. So this is a kind of a toothless tiger. We thought the legislature would fix it. It didn't happen. So we went on to do things about defining how people can vote. Used to be they had to be present to vote. Now they can vote absentee. They can vote electronically. They can do by proxies. The problem with that is that if the motion is changed on the floor, then their vote doesn't count because they don't know what they're voting on, up or down. HOAs cannot disqualify anybody from voting. If you don't pay your bill, you still get to vote. Kind of an odd change. Resale certificates, this is where real estate agents find themselves in the crosshairs of the Real Estate Commission, is you've got to file, you got to do that 37-3 on a TREC form to request information from the HOA. That's because if you go to closing and you sell a property in an HOA and we don't generate a resale certificate, we don't know who these people are. So we're still chasing somebody that's moved off to Albany, New York, all the while you sold it to somebody new and nobody knows their name and the title companies don't share it with you. They don't have any reason to until we change this law about resale certificates. Sales transfer fees are safe. There was a time, you probably don't know about this, where the developers were creating resale fees, transfer fees that were perpetual. KB Homes was the worst about that. They would sell a home and say every time it sells in perpetuity, you owe us $100 each time or $500 each time. The lawsuit generated out of Maryland found its way to Texas. Texas very quickly stepped up and said you can't do that. Now that did not take away the ability for the HOA to charge a resale or a transfer fee or a beautification or a neighborhood enhancement, or there's all kinds of names out there. My problem, this is my problem, and I dare say you've not recognized it when you see it. There's a lot of outlaw management companies out there that they will charge that neighborhood enhancement or transfer fee or whatever they want to call it, and they keep the money. It doesn't go to the HOA. And to me, that's a legitimate question to the HOA is, I'm going to pay you this $500 or $1,000 for a transfer fee. Where does it go? If they stammer or if they stutter, you can pretty well bet it goes into their checkbook and not into the HOA's. And I have some serious issues, and I testified about that as well. We still went on to talk about limiting American flags. You can't do it. Now you can limit how big they are, you can limit how many there are, you can limit where you put them, but that's a freedom of speech, First Amendment right. American flags is still litigated. Even this most recent year we had those things. Rain barrels can't be outlawed. Religious symbols, although you can limit their size and location and numbers. Solar panels, everybody hates solar panels, but yet that's the future coming at us. We're seeing shingles now that are really solar panels, and that's probably much more attractive. But again, the HOA can have a say, albeit not a limitation anymore. We can relocate white-tailed deer. I don't know about Williamson County where I live. The deer are prolific and a problem. Yes, it's just a problem. So now HOAs can come in and relocate them. Doesn't say they can harvest them, says they can relocate them. What's that?
It's happening in so many cities now because people started feeding them.
Well, and that is a problem, without a question.
That's why they started coming in.
And they're not threatened by anything. You can't let dogs run loose. And
I used to live in Victoria, and last time I was there, I was shocked to see a whole herd of deer in somebody's front yard.
oh, up on the porch and eating their flowers, and it's just nuts. And I don't have an answer for that. We in 2013, we went on to make further changes about preventing a director from contracting to the HOA, such as mowing or painting or whatever. A director cannot do that. That is a conflict of interest. They lose their protection under the business organization code. Member voting is again now secret. This just keeps going back and forth. Used to be the HOAs would say to you, you can't build across a lot line. If I own this lot and that lot just has to say fallow and you have to build a home over there. They took that away from us and said, took it away from the developers and said, I can use that lot and I can put a pool or a garage or whatever, but if I sell this home and don't sell that one, then I have to return that one to its original condition before I can ever sell it. Kind of an odd law, but that's how it played out. Because of hurricanes, we're now across the entire state allowed to put generators in places because of power interruptions, because of the grid, all those things that I'm sure you've read about. Same thing with septic tanks, same thing with tree removals. I don't know about Williamson County. I was afraid when I got into Mission Oaks I would read legacy oak laws. Y'all don't seem to have any. We have them down where we live, where if you cut down a tree of 6 inches, you have to plant 2 trees 3 inches to replace it. I haven't read that yet. Mission Oaks didn't have anything like that.
Austin is.
Austin's terrible about that. And if you cut down a tree of over 10 inches in Travis County, they have a death penalty. They just go nuts over that kind of stuff. It's just silly. We learned some new laws we learned some new words. Verified mail. Verified mail is not certified return receipt. It's those guys, if you've noticed them, the mail people carry those little guns and they'll scan them. That's verified mail, and I can literally tell you within minutes when they stuck something in your mailbox. Not handed it to you, not signed for it, when they stuck it in your mailbox. And that's all it takes. I'm sorry, Tom?
Even if it went in a different mailbox.
Even if it went in a different mailbox, which it happens often. I hate the U.S. Postal Service. They cost me tens of thousands of dollars every year in labor because they do exactly that, or better yet, just throw it away. I don't know where they throw it. It's just a mess with these folks. Board meetings now required to be open except during the development periods. Developments are those first 75% of the lots. They can come in and do a whole bunch of things. The good HOAs, my HOAs, we have 16 of them that are new coming out of the ground in the last 2 or 3 years, still under development, is we very much invite everybody to come to it and see the business of it, because what we're trying to do is train, educate, inform so that you can be some kind of leader or have some kind of position of responsibility when the developer goes away and doesn't have any skin in the game. Board meetings can be held electronically as long as everybody can hear. I put it out there on the VIOP where you can log into a site or you can get on a conference call with up to 100 people and listen to it. You don't have to necessarily be heard, but you can hear the directors and make comments, typically by emails, how we like to do it. Elections have to have a 20-day notice before the last day of the notice. So if you're going to say, we're going to vote on the 1st, then you had to back up earlier. Earlier than the 10th to tell everybody there's an election coming up. This is just minutia I'm sharing with you right now. The clearance still has that 75% or 10-year was restated, but creating an intermediary safe harbor. And that's kind of a funny way to say that Scott's a developer and he's got this 300 lot subdivision and he gets up to his 9th year, 11th month and he hadn't sold 75%, then he can go put them in one of y'all's names as a broker and literally hide them and still have control in that safe harbor as an intermediary. Lawyers do a lot of this. There's just a lot of dirty pool, if you will. In 85 would have been 2017, they allowed HOAs to have control over certain types of vehicles. The FedEx, the garbage trucks, all that kind of stuff coming on our street, we can control either their time or worse yet, their speed. We have the ability to record their speed and make complaints to those folks. They forced some of your HOAs, I don't know how much experience you got with condominiums or townhouses, they typically will buy water in a bulk 1 meter and then either allocate it to each person at a flat 1/14 or whatever it is, or if they're looking for ways, because Scott's got a family of 5 and next door neighbors, my Aunt Ethel is her by herself, she clearly doesn't use as much water, then they can take a model out of the apartment house people called allocation, and now they have to use those required disclosures found in the water code about how to charge for water and sewer and all those kind of things, where they can't just arbitrarily come up with a number that says he's got 5 and she's got 1, and you can see the math. There's a formula out there with the water code people. There's a very complex bill out there that has to do with vote splitting. I know you don't know anybody like that, but I'm married to somebody like that sometimes I fall on one side of an issue and she falls on the other. And so now there are provisions for vote splitting in HOA issues. It's a little bit hard to read, but it's after you quit laughing, you'll see it's got some merit to it. Foreclosures, if you've got a piece of property that you sold or somebody you know that's subject to a foreclosure in an HOA, hire a lawyer. It's just very, very, it's incredibly complex. It's nothing like a lender coming out and foreclosing on a piece of property. It's got a judicial requirement underlying with all the requirements of notice, proper notice, opportunities to mitigate, opportunities to rescind. There's just a whole bunch of language in there that makes this thing fascinating. Please hire a lawyer. This is probably one of the most major changes of all, and this is a fascinating part, and this is something that I want to share with you as an opportunity for some of you. The rest of you, back to sleep, whatever it is you've been doing up till now. Imagine this, a single family home over here on 4th Street or Church Street, or just a nice, quiet neighborhood. Georgetown, got a lot of attraction for a city, got a lot of cuteness, the downtown, whatever. And so I, as a property manager, rent this little 1,200 square foot home for $1,200 a month. And everybody says, yeah, that's market value and that's a good value and everybody's happy. Or, and here's what's happened over the last 3 years, or the owner reads Time magazine, watches TV, reads the blocks, and starts to see these names pop up. And so they make a phone call to VBRO and say, well, what about my house in Georgetown? Well, our model says you can rent that for $1,000 a week. Now think about that. You've got an owner that wants to buy a fine home out here in Mission Oaks, and they own a home up here, and they're going to keep it, and their choices are to rent it for $1,200 a month or $1,000 a week, 42 times a year. So the money is just fascinating. There's some takeaways. You don't use people like me. You don't use people like Greg. You use people like this. And they've gotten some bad press. They found cameras in some of their houses, and they found some recordings in some of their houses, and they've double booked, and they've done all kinds of things. My daughter is married to a genius. And at age 41, he started a company, and now he's retired from the company. They're based in Austin. He's got a 35-year-old woman that's just as smart as he is that runs it for him. And they have traveled the world. Just came back from 2 years of going from the Great Wall of China to Stonehenge to swimming in Phuket and just all over the place. And so now he has decided enough of this playing, and he's going to go to work for the State Department. And I don't know where he's going after this, but they wore out Airbnb because how nice some of those properties are, and it's expensive. Don't get me wrong, $1,500, $2,500 a week to rent there, but you don't have to do anything. You don't have to mow the yard. You have to wash the dishes, you're dirty, but certainly you get to enjoy the house as if it's your own. So what happened was these people crept into our day-to-day lexicon, and some people said, well, I don't like that. Hell, there's 20 people in that house over there. They're parking in front of my house. Nobody parks, and I can't get my mail. And the complaints were just endless. And so we started seeing litigation show up 3 years ago. It went through the 13th court, which is in Houston, and duked it out. It went through the 12th court, which is down in Corpus, and both of those courts said, you got nothing that says you can't do this. The Supreme Court has recently, and you can have this, here, I'll show it to you, it's right here. This lawsuit right here, May the 25th, 2018. This came from the Supreme Court of Texas, and they said, you got no prohibitions against it, folks. Show me your covenants. Show me where it says you can't do that. So they decided, and they used some language that I think is a double-edged sword for you, and I'm going to make this very brief. They said in their decision, the law recognizes the rights of the parties to contract with relation to the property as they see fit, provided it does not contravene public policy in their contracts, otherwise being illegal. It went on to say, this is the Supreme Court talking, while our jurisprudence does not favor restraints on the free use of land, that's what fee simple is, you get to enjoy it, whatever's legal, that, I lost my place, that we previously acknowledged that restrictive covenants can enhance the value of real property. Accordingly, when a land is sold and the agreed to covenants become part of the consideration, the buyer submits to a burden upon their land because of a fact that a like burden is also imposed on the neighbor's land. That's what an SRA, that's what a CID, that's what an HOA, POA is. It's uniformly applied across the board, this burden of not allowing those people. Guess what? It wasn't there. Nobody saw it coming. So if you're in a neighborhood where people are saying, oh, these short-term rentals, they're horrible. Those people will come in here and within a week they're gone and we don't know anything about them. We don't know where they come from. We don't know anything. I'm sorry. Get used to it. Because I just shared with you how much money's involved in these things. Money being the root of a whole bunch of evil. And so if you have somebody arguing about short-term rentals, know that Texas is trying to sort out ways to put burdens. There's 11, to my knowledge, 11 of these kind of companies out there that I'm aware of, to put burdens on them to do criminal backgrounds, to do some kind of responsibility, to know they're not in there selling cocaine to anybody less than 11 years old or whatever it is they're doing. You're just trying to get a grip on this, and you can't do it by saying you can't use these people, but you can go back and control these folks. That seems to be the direction I think they're going in.
Does that include the trading of homes too?
I'm not sure. Tell me what that means.
Well, somebody wants to go, say, to San Francisco, and they find a home away, and they want to come to Texas and stay in your house. That trading, does that go through this company too?
I'm not aware of them doing those kind of swaps, but yes, it would seem the laws. Here's where I was trying to go with this, There's nothing says you can't do it. Nothing prohibits that. People will, back to my very first slide, you can't tell me what to do. And that guy, I can't stand that guy and his 18 children and 43 cars parked in my front house watching football all week or whatever.
Now keep in mind that some local ordinances have required that taxes be paid on these.
Let's talk about that. Here, you can't, Avis, if she were here, would say, you can't fix stupid. She did that one time and I had to crawl under the table. We were up in North Texas somewhere doing one of these kind of things. So here we are in May with the Supreme Court saying, you can't enforce it. The city of Grapevine, in their infinite wisdom, for 10 years, saw this coming and they collected occupancy tax just like hotels. Short-term rentals, occupancy tax, lots of money, well over $1 million a year for 10 years. On September the 1st, after this date, the city council said, whoa, no more. Can't do it anymore. So if you want to read it, I have a 1,000-page brief on my desk from 16 owners that use these 11 companies where they are suing the city of Grapevine. The city of Grapevine's only defense is those 16 owners have dirty hands. Now, I don't know what, or unclean hands. I don't know what that means. I know the theory of unclean hands in law, but I don't see how that's a defense for the city. But the city of Grapevine has now spent well over $1 million of their taxpayers' money to stop this after the Supreme Court said you can't stop it. Let me remind you how much money we're talking about.
You also have cities come out with citywide ordinances preventing short-term rentals.
And they won't be able to enforce them. I mean, the court's very clear about this. Yes, sir.
I just want to clarify. So you're saying that HOAs can't enforce that unless it's in the covenant?
No, they can't even enforce it then.
Okay.
They don't have anything. That's what we're finding is there's no language that addresses this.
So, okay, 2 questions. So Austin requires you to have permits. They have a certain number of permits that allow VRBO. They
Right.
still have to abide by the permitting system.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And that's really the only control we've got right now.
Right.
The legislature wants to come back and force those companies to somehow screen or guarantee that he's not black market selling babies or something.
Right.
And every
Well, the
week
other
move.
thing for them, I think it was also to not have, like, in subdivision fraternities or sorority houses too, like many.
Similar problem.
Yeah. I have another question. So I ran in, when I was actively selling, I ran into a situation where the city didn't necessarily have an ordinance, but the HOA had restrictions on single-family households that, you know, of course, there's certain rules, whether you're by blood, you can have one relative living with you, yada, yada.
Consanguinity is what that's called.
Okay, so what about a situation where someone either purchases a home or for a rental, or purchases the home to live in it and rent the rooms out? How would they handle that with
Well, now
the
the city can control that renting rooms out and boarding and those kind of things.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where consanguinity kicks in too. You can't have more than 2 bloodlines or something. Where I live, that's kind of the rule they use. But I think this is meant more to that 1 week,
Okay.
8 days, that kind of stuff. So the thing that seems to be absent in all the ones I've read, and I've probably got 300 of them on my server. If y'all ever need it, this is such an intense issue for me, and I've testified so many times in it. I've got about 3 million pages of research. If you ever ask a question, call me, I'll find it and tell you what I know, and it's up to you to figure out what it means.
Well, I had spent time calling around asking, because there weren't any city restrictions that I could find, and my client wanted to purchase a home where he was able to rent the rooms out to roommates, let's say. And the only restrictions that I could find were in the CCNRs and the covenants for HOA. And when I called the president of the HOA, I said, how do you enforce this? What does this look like? Because obviously we don't want to put a buyer into something they can't have longevity in, right?
Right.
And they said, we don't even look at that, so.
See, that's it. They don't know, well, how would you
Yeah,
look at it?
So, you know, because out of protection for my buyer, I had to honestly say, you're in the CCNRs, it states that you cannot do this. You're buying understanding that if they want to, so what you're saying is they can't necessarily enforce that.
Yeah, well, and there's hardly anything for them to use. And like I do a lot of HOAs, and we don't have statutorily, I can't even see a copy of the lease. I can't see their application. I can't evict them. I mean, they tried that 2 sessions ago, and it fell flat of its feet.
So like Sun City has a 3-month minimum, so that would,
Now, see, they got kind of a weird deal out there, though. They got that age 55 protected class thing.
but they also have that 3-month minimum on
Right.
these. But I have I kind of manage a condo in South Austin.
Mm-hmm.
And they are asking for the lease, and every tenant has to fill out a background check. They're doing it. They required it, or they.
I can show you statutorily that's prohibited. We tried to get that through, and the legislature said invasion of privacy.
So no background check are allowed.
They need to
No.
do that though. My best friend's in a lawsuit with.
I agree with you.
VRBO right now.
We pushed that hard. I testified for it, and it fell flat. It never got out of committee.
So even on a long-term lease, they're not allowed to do that?
No.
Okay.
It's not, well, where's the standing come from? There is no standing from an HOA to a privately owned residence.
Well, they're not allowing any pets. Now there's.
Now, that's a different deal.
Yeah, and there's some.
They
that-
can't say that. They can say it, but they can't enforce it. Under Obama, this really went nuts. I'm in a 5-year lawsuit over pets that look like chickens. And I'll tell you, we've spent about $220,000. We've won 5 times. They sued us for the 6th time. And they've spent well over $500,000
That's chickens.
over chickens. And so the legislature every session picks up a bill and says, we want everybody to have 5 to 6 chickens. It never gets off the floor. And you know, this is like fishing. I mean, I can't catch the itch. But people will spend tens of thousands of dollars for fishing equipment and boats and license, and I can go to the market and buy it a whole lot cheaper.
Yeah.
With no effort at all.
Fresh in some markets.
And Avis has got chickens, and I think it's wonderful as long as she's got them and I don't.
Ask Terry about those chickens.
I got my real estate license in Texas the first time in 1968. And I worked in Houston, in River Oaks.
Yeah, wow.
Then my husband didn't want me to work, but it's a long story. And I don't think at that time they allowed Jewish people to live there.
Oh, there's a lot of that. It's 1968
Yeah.
was when we had the Civil Rights Act under LBJ that made us wipe out all that. I've got a neighborhood that I manage that says only people of the Caucasian race can own property.
Now, do you have that now?
No, it was vacated in '68 under the Civil Rights Act. But it's an older neighborhood, Arrowhead Point.
I mean, they still belong to the River Oaks.
But you're exactly right. Oh, yeah. And there's this lawsuit I was talking about in Seattle. There's a third one that never got off the ground because of the first 2, and it was about, of all people, Ethiopians. Now, how many Ethiopians do you think are in Seattle? I don't know where that came from, but discrimination is always doomed to fail. No matter what you've heard, it's always doomed to fail. Yes, ma'am.
A question that's not about short-term rentals, but I've been emailing you about Rancho Siena Section 8.
Uh-huh.
That is the lock and leave.
Oh, yeah.
That everybody in Section 8 wants to have that removed, but we don't know what to do.
I can give you the mechanism. Are we still under the developer's control?
Probably because it's not built out.
Yes, you are.
Okay, thank you, Scott.
So, yes, 67%. And you can call me again, and I'll tell you how to get that petition started.
Okay.
Where you have to put it up for vote. Now, remember all this divided crap. My wife taking opposing views on stuff, so you got to be a little careful. Let me say something really controversial. You can find the answer you want if you ask the question right.
There you go. Yes, absolutely.
If you don't know how to ask the question, you're going to get whatever answer. It's like flipping a quarter. It just comes up.
We don't know how to.
So ask the question and you'll get the answer you want. Okay, we're almost done here. The 86 legislature we just finished last Friday. Some funny things came out of it. You can no longer prohibit children from selling lemonade on the corner. You can carry guns, and you can't prevent guests, tenants, or owners from carrying, storing, or possessing firearms or ammunition. Second Amendment. Pretty easy reading where I live. Number 3, limits eligibility in relation to the cohabitation of the same primary residence. 2 people living in the same place can't be on the board of directors or serve in some authoritative position. That's called vote stacking. Next to last, streamlines and reorganizes the abilities to regulate the display of political signs. Political signs fall under the First Amendment. Political rights of me saying I vote for Bernie, God forbid. You can't say you can't do it, but you can further control where you put them and how many you put them and how big they are and all those things. The one that's important is this one about 2596. Never got out of committee. I went to those meetings. It was hilarious. There were 3 people there that liked chickens. There were 38 that didn't. And so that never got out, about 6 or fewer chickens in a single family residential lot. Can you imagine chickens everywhere running loose? This is my lawsuit. Chickens are comfort animals, therapeutic animals. It's crazy.
Not a service animal.
Not a.
So silly question maybe, but poultry versus hen and a rooster. I've heard there are restrictions on you can't have a rooster in Cedar Park. I don't know if that's true.
And I hope, God, I love that. Anybody like roosters or donkeys?
Deep fried.
There you go, deep fried.
Deep fried.
So here's the takeaways that I would offer you to take out of all of this garbage. It's nothing but garbage. Is remember the greater good. If it benefits everybody, that's that rising tide lifts all boats. The declarant is in control for a long time. Remember, they're the ones soaking all the money into it. Be friends with them. Even if you don't like them, find ways to be friends with them. Expect more than one crazy person in a neighborhood. They're always there. They're insidious. They will fight you. They will spend hundreds of thousands of dollars for reasons. No kidding. When they've got 20 days to give you all the controlling documents, that's in our contract, the Real Estate Commission's contract. Ask for a copy for you. Read it. Understand HOAs and where they get their authority and where they get their controls, and see what it is that bothers you about not more than one left-handed blue-eyed child. Whatever it is their funny restrictions are, read it. Know that the lawyers are changing, Burton being the best one at this, is changing how they do it. Used to be we had declarations, we still have to have that, go to the county, the city, whatever. But then bylaws, covenants, conditions, restrictions, CC&Rs, and policies, they used to be 3 different, very distinct documents. Now, Burton is putting them all together. So don't get all fired up because you can't find the policies. Read. Realtors don't read. Read this stuff. Understand it. This is a very poor copy of it. There's a white page out there that talks about why you buy properties in HOAs. I'm more than happy to email this to you or send it to you. It's got some real merit to it. It's got some fascination to it. It is not universally applicable because not all HOAs nor are all people created equal, although it says that. Get those documents when you go to when you get the execution date. Last party signs is how I define that, by the way. When the last party signs, you get the execution, you turn it over to the title company. They got 20 days to give, the seller has 20 days to supply you with all controlling documents. Ask for a copy for yourself. Keep a copy for yourself. Thumb through them. If you got questions, ask Scott. ask Avis, call me, I don't care. Let's see if we can figure out what it means. Sometimes they're written in foreign languages. Lawyers are real bad about writing in lawyerese. Whatever you do, don't get mad. You're instantly my victim when you get mad. I've done this many times. When they come in there and they're all fired up, they've already lost half the battle. Now it's just for me to take advantage of it. And with all that said, I give up. You got questions?
I'll tell you one thing, you don't want to live in Sun City when there's an election going on.
Well, and I completely agree with that.
I have never, ever in my life seen so damn many signs as I did the last presidential election.
Yeah, there was also a fist fight on one street.
Well,
Next
you
to
know
a
what
listing
I
that we had too.
I don't know if it was taken out of the yards or not.
But does it catch you off guard, reading the paper, watching the news, reading the internet, of how unhappy so many people are?
Yeah.
And it's not just the millennials, it's just not Gen X's. I'm telling you, I got a baby boomer that every day she gets in my face. And I just smile at her and said, "You're still crazy, aren't you?"
All right, what's a baby boomer? What's a what's the difference in all of this?
Okay, the greatest generation is going to take you up to 47. 48 to 64 is going to be the boomers. X's come in 65 or so up to about 79, 78. Then we go into the Y's, and the millennials kick in the last 22 years.
The millennials.
The millennials are the new people.
Let's go. So what's 79 and 80?
That's the Y's,
Y's?
the Gen Y's.
That's me.
That's me. Yeah.
All right, let's give it up for Bill.
Thanks, everybody.
And now let's give it up for our sponsor for lunch today, Carpet Now.
Everybody, my name is Chuck, and I am with Carpet Now. We are a carpet-only company, and we specialize in helping you guys get those houses ready for the market. We started this because of the problems we were seeing. It takes forever to get somebody out to get an estimate. Once you get the carpet ordered, it takes weeks before it comes in, maybe another week for the install. We can get the job done in 3 to 4 days, and that's from phone call to install. And the process is super simple. I go out to the client's house, I bring a carpet sample, pick out a carpet, give me another 15, 20 minutes, I can have the whole house measured and give them the solid estimate right there. If they want to move forward, we can schedule the install as quickly or as far out as it needs to be. We have 4 levels of carpet. The most popular with sellers is going to be our $1.99 a square foot. That price includes a 33-ounce carpet, a 6-pound padding, the rip out of the old stuff, the installation of the new, and the tag. The only thing, if they have stairs, that is $175 for that. That's the way to charge you go straight to the guys. If your client needs doesn't have cash on hand, then we offer payment at closing, or we also have 6-month interest-free financing. I'm always available. It's really easy to make an appointment with me. And pass out some cards and some flyers. You can call the business line.